Yeah, so I had the pleasure to actually meet Jay, and I was jokingly saying I had to travel miles away to meet another colleague here. But Jay is going to be talking about mentoring past imposter syndrome to expand the HPC workforce. Jay is all yours.
All right, thank you everybody for coming. This talk really builds on Clement's talk, but focuses really on how do we feed in enough qualified people that we can actually build the workforce, because things I've discovered over time and all of the recruiting and the mentoring work that I've done, the difficulty has always been trying to get enough qualified people available so that we can then pull them all the way through. Okay. So this is a little bit of background, a little bit of additional resources so that we can I get my slides now here? Okay, that would be a little easier, yeah. For us to be able to look at why this is actually an issue. And Clement really talked about very well that there's a lot of specialized skills that are necessary. And here are just some of the additional bits of information here. So like Brian in the back here, he's been working with this HPC certification program here in South Africa. And that's just not a South Africa problem. It's actually a global problem. So you can see some of the other areas, both in the US and Europe in particular, that I was able to identify that point out that this is a global problem that everybody needs to worry about. It's not just an issue for, say, the global South. The biggest problems that I run into when I look at students and try to get them interested in the field is that they don't really understand what it is. All they really know about is what industry jobs they see, and like, oh, the big tech companies, they do these kinds of things, or a bank might have particular kinds of IT systems. And then that whole idea of being able to work with science from a computational standpoint is something they just don't envision as something that's really possible. And part of getting them to be able to just proceed into the career path is just get past that ignorance barrier. And then once we get past that, oh, this is something you can do, then we have that, am I good enough? Am I worthy of doing these kinds of things, issues to deal with? Because the students look at it and say, oh, that's something that requires all of this advanced knowledge, and I don't think I can actually get through that. And because of that, they just say, okay, that's something for some really smart person to deal with, rather than saying I might be really smart enough to do it as well. I start really early when I start working with students, and that includes even going as early as grade 8. There's a school right near where I grew up in the US that is one of the top high schools in the United States. And because I grew up right by there, I can actually go as a local that says, this is where I come from and this is what I'm able to do. And I talk to their 9th grade classes every year and say, this is how science and computation have really been combined over the years, and why you might want to get involved in it, and what kinds of things about it make it a possible career path, and how you can get started on it. Beyond that, I work a lot with undergraduate students. For me, because of my job, I really need to work with US citizens primarily. And I can work with a lot of other people, but in order to have them come on site at Sandia, they really need to be US citizens. So the pipeline in the United States, at least, the most US citizens that we have are really undergraduates. And that means that I have a lot more work to do, but at the same time, I have the opportunity to kind of build them into a new PhD student eventually. What I do currently is, by many people's standards, a little extreme. I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 students and early career people that I work with at any given time. That is a large number. There's probably 10 to 15 that are very active, meaning that it's at least once a month, if not once a week, that I talk to the person. The others are people that I talk to, say, on a quarterly basis. But these are people that I've worked with, some of them for 10 years or more. And they are literally completely spread across the globe. And it's more a matter of, as I've talked to people and met with them, they said, hey, can we meet regularly? And the answer is always yes. And it's not a question of, do our backgrounds match, but there's something about our ability to communicate and what I can help them with that gives them additional support to be able to grow their career and be able to do the kind of things that they want to do. The last piece really is the big one, is I travel a lot. And part of traveling a lot is I go to a lot of conferences. I go do a lot of recruiting events for Sandia. I work with universities to do design projects. So I propose projects to have students work on. I go do judging for these. So then I talk to a lot of different teams and ask them about what they're doing, and then kind of pull them in and just ask them questions. Hey, have you thought about this as a potential career option? And then give them my card and say, talk to me later. And that way I can then start to pull people in, and then I can keep the pipeline growing. Every once in a while, I do get cold contact emails. So somebody's read a research paper that I published and they have a question, and they actually are brave enough that they send me an email. And for those, I make every effort to make sure I respond, because I know the amount of difficulty it is to get up the nerve to be able to email somebody that has a lot of publications out there. And then the last one, as I mentioned, is I go talk to high school students on a regular basis. The things that I see in terms of imposter syndrome that are the difficult parts to really overcome is, and these are really the symptoms that I end up having to help mentor people get past. And the big one is they just say, oh, that's not something I can do. Or another big one is the whole apology idea. And if you're up giving a talk to people and you've been asked to do that, then you have qualifications that say you should be allowed to do that. The last one is one that I'm particularly emphatic about. Is there's the ask for forgiveness rather than permission idea, and that one I completely disagree with. You should take a much stronger stance that I will mention a little bit later, what I think is a better approach for that. In terms of how I go about mentoring people in general, the number one thing is there's truly no substitute for time. And because of that, I spend a lot of my time just working with people and talking to people. The downside for that is my day job frequently gets pushed to the side. So I have to kind of find ways to, through working with people, have them help me get my day job done. And usually that's mutually beneficial. So that's generally not a problem. Another problem that I end up dealing with over time is somebody says, I can't do this, or I'm having a problem with that. And the reality is that that's not really the issue, that's the symptom. And you have to spend the time working with the person and getting to know them personally to understand what the real root causes of their issues are. Because if you can't get past that root problem, then addressing the symptoms isn't really going to help them solve the problem that they're dealing with. You just say, okay, here, if you practice enough, then you can give this presentation. It's not about that. There's other fears that they have. They're saying why they can't give that presentation. And if you can figure out what those are and work with them, then any presentation they give, they can be much more confident about. One of the other pieces that I work a lot with is that I try to figure out exactly where somebody is comfortable, and I do my best to keep them just beyond that. And the challenge there is you have to know them well enough and be able to read their body language and responses to things. But if you keep them just beyond where they're comfortable, they're always learning and pushing and moving ahead. And I've done this for many years with people, including both people in industry as well as in an academic environment. I had one guy I was working with at one point where we're trying to do some software design. And I said to him, Steve, that's not going to work because of these issues. And he said, yes, it will. And I realized based on how emphatic he was about it, he was not ready to deal with that answer yet. So about 6 weeks later, he finally ran into the problem that I told him he would. And I brought that up again. And he said, why didn't you tell me this? I said, I did, but you weren't ready to hear it. And he thought, and he said, yeah, you're right. So at that point, you kind of have to be able to be flexible with it and know that sometimes they just have to hit the barriers and let them go, but be ready to say, okay, we can work past this. It's just a matter of trying to be aware of what they're going to hit and to be able to be there to support them. The last one I think is really the most important one, and that is always be supportive no matter what. Try to find some way to be that positive, friendly face that can be an anchor in the audience or in whatever they're doing, and be able to just make sure that they understand that no matter what, you're going to support them. In terms of technical mentoring, I changed things up a little bit. And in general, because again, I'm trying to get my day job taken care of so I can actually do the part of my job that I find more interesting, which is really this mentoring side of things. And that is, I will have some project goal that I have to get done for my day job. And I kind of spread out in pieces across different people, depending on what their interests are. But sometimes a student or whoever else it is brings their own project goal that they have. And whether or not I know something about that topic is really less important than the actual project. But we just kind of go through this series of steps here and try to make sure, for the most importantly on this, it's the person that I'm mentoring is the person that actually has to do the work. My job is to ask them questions and is to be able to identify where their knowledge gaps are and to be able to make sure that I follow up with them. If they start trying to cancel because they're not feeling confident about things, it's like, no, we need to meet. And you may not feel like you continue with this, but I know you can do this. And this is something that we need to work through together. And again, that's a little bit selfish on my part, but it's also a matter of trying to build that confidence in them to be able to say that they can do this. So that regular follow-up is something that a lot of mentors really say, I just don't have a lot of time, and they just kind of let the mentorship slide. But I try to make a point of saying, okay, if I haven't talked to you recently, let's talk again. If this is a summer internship, I talk to them literally every single day. And maybe 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, or it might be 5 hours, depending on what they need for that day. And that's just a matter of trying to make sure that I'm keeping them on track and giving them whatever support they need to be successful. And down on the bottom here, there's an important part about technology choices and direction, particularly for like undergrads. They have never really been put in a position where they are given a goal and then said, how are we getting there? And they have to make all the choices of technology direction and such. And what I do is I say, oh, this is where we're going. How are we getting there? And if they tell me they have technology they need to learn, I give them pointers on how to get started. But if they say, I think we should try this, unless I know for sure that's going to fail, I say, great, let's go that way. And if they reach a failure point, then they say, we need to change in this direction. I said, okay, why is this going to be a better direction? Give me evidence to support that. And that way I develop that thought process and then to force them to say, okay, I'm not just changing because this is hard. I'm changing because this should be better in a fundamental way. And they have to convince me. Otherwise I tell them, no, let's stick with this a little bit longer. And those are the kinds of things that I use to really help them overcome the, oh, this problem's too hard for me, but instead kind of help push them through it and just kind of give them that gentle support, almost a little bit of a push, but not really a hard push, to try to keep them moving forward. So this kind of goes off in a weird direction here, but so Weekly World News for the Americans in the audience who were of a reasonable age, similar to my own, for say, in the 1980s and into the 90s, there was a supermarket tabloid. So these were little newspapers by the checkout counter in the supermarket, and one was called the Weekly World News. And the thing about the Weekly World News is that it was completely ridiculous. Everything that was in there was basically completely wrong, but they always had headlines like chocoholic mom gives birth to sugar-coated baby, or Elvis spotted on Mars, or machinery that carved the canals on Mars discovered, and all these other kinds of crazy things. But when you're working the overnight shift in the grocery store, you need something to do. So you kind of flip through and read these articles and stuff just for entertainment. But one thing that all of the articles shared is they always had a expert say as part of the quotes in the article to support whatever claim they were making. And the only conclusion that I could draw was that expert meant somebody that knew more than the person writing the article. And so, but just by that definition, then everybody who's working on something, because they're the person who truly knows the most about it, they're always the expert. And that's something that they need to embrace. And then Discworld, for people who've read any of those books, one of the things in there is, how do you know somebody's a wizard? Well, they have a pointy hat. And so as long as you look the part, and as long as you know that you have a little more knowledge, you are by definition the expert, and just need to embrace that and kind of build that support. So again, these are some of the reasons why that I try to give people support and say, this is why you're the expert. It's not just because you know a little bit more than everybody else. It's that, here, let's go through this. It's you're the one who's been looking at all this. You've done all the experiments. You've written this up. Any questions that I ask you, it's not because I know the answer. I'm trying to check your work. It's more a matter of, I'm curious what you discovered. And getting them to understand that just by virtue that they've done the work, they actually are the true experts on things. Something else that I've run into fairly often, and this is currently I'm an acting manager of a research and software engineering department. And part of what I'm dealing with there is that we have a lot of junior staff and people with just a bachelor's or a master's degree working with a lot of PhDs. And because of that, many of them don't understand what the work expectations are really well. And they'll be asked to work on a new project, and they'll come to a project meeting, and the project meeting goes at normal speed for all the PhDs that have been working on it for years. And they come out of it saying, I can't do that. and they don't understand anything that's going on. And a lot of the issues are things like they're using jargon that's specific to the project or to the domain area that the person doesn't know about, or that they are just ignoring normal policies about, okay, we need to worry about remote people attending, so let's make sure we have remote attendance. And for example, the laser pointer on here is not useful because we have remote attendees. And we need to use the laser pointer on the Zoom, otherwise they can't see what I'm pointing at. So that's one of those things that just to be aware of, that way you can make sure that you can have somebody get fully integrated in. And I always, in those situations, also try to stop multiple times during the meeting and do a sync point and say, okay, what have you understood everything? We're here to answer questions for you. And if you have anything that you're not fully understanding, then ask them now, because we're going to move forward assuming that you do. And it doesn't matter what you ask, and we'll see what they ask. And frequently they'll ask questions that seem very basic and they'll be kind of embarrassed about it. And then when we see, it's like, oh, okay, and we fill them in. And they're like, oh, okay, I really can't ask anything. And then they get pulled in and they can actually feel like they're part of the team. So part of the other piece that people get scared about is they don't understand who they're interacting with and why. And these are just some of the general roles that I see that people end up having to interact with. And they need to pay attention to each of these audiences have different expectations. And because of that, the way you interact with them is a little bit different. And some of them are more friendly than others. For example, a layman audience is generally pretty easy because you can gloss over some of the deeper technical details or things that didn't quite work out right, and they won't necessarily pick up on it. But if you're talking to your PhD thesis committee, then they're going to want to know exactly, and you're going to have to be precise about it. If you're doing a grant proposal, then you're going to have to make sure that you have sufficient evidence as to why this is important and what you want to do and why you think that might work, and be able to work all that out. And there's particular kinds of communication skills that people need to develop. And all of these things are people can do over time. This one I think is also really important, and that is appearance of confidence. And yes, con men or con women, however you wish to phrase it, they all are successful because they gain our trust. And it's not a matter of them actually being stronger or better. It's more a matter of they come to you with that confidence and say, this is what you need to do. This is why you need to do it. This is why it's important. And they talk fast and they get you a little bit confused because you're not really paying that close attention. And then they can take advantage of you. And that kind of skill, while you're not trying to confuse the audience, it's really the same kind of thing when you're doing presentations to people, where it's if you speak with confidence, then people will not say, oh, this is somebody that's not sure of what they're doing. And that way they will give you more the benefit of the doubt when you make statements about things, rather than saying, oh, I'm not going to pay attention to this person, and they may just walk out of the room or anything else like that. And again, remember the definition of expert is somebody that looks the part and has this much more knowledge than everybody else in the room about exactly what they're talking about. One of the other pieces that I like to make sure that people pay attention to is don't undersell yourself. And I have done this, unfortunately, a little bit too successfully with a few people, and but have kind of tempered it a little bit. For example, instead of saying I'm a student working on X, say I'm a researcher working on X with Professor Y. And the change in that is that if somebody comes into a presentation and they say, oh, it's a student presentation, they're not going to give it necessarily as much credit or really necessarily pay as much attention. But if it's just, oh, it's a researcher presentation, their expectations and attention will be higher. And that's a fairly common phenomenon that I've noticed over time. And the last two in particular is that asks for forgiveness rather than permission. And the real key on that one is not asking for forgiveness. It's more a demand to know why you were wrong and what you should have done instead. And that way you're asserting that I know what I'm doing, and you need to tell me what I did that was wrong. Now, if they tell you what you did was wrong and you agree and say, oh, okay, then say, I agree, that was wrong. I can change that in the future. But anytime somebody asks you questions, you're not sure what the answers are, it's not a matter of apologizing, saying, I don't know the answer. It's like, hey, thank you for the suggestion for future work. We don't have an answer for that right now. And be the person who's giving the presentation that ends up dominating how the questions get answered, rather than giving the power to the audience. So it's not a matter of being controlling the audience, but if something comes up and somebody's being aggressive, you can say, well, that's a complex question. Let's talk about it during the break. And that way you have then shut down that kind of adversarial relationship, but at the same time, you're answering the question in a way that works better for you and then makes the audience more calm. And my favorite sad puppy picture I've ever found. There's a lot of apologies that happen when people aren't confident about what they're doing. And because of that, always take it as a suggestion for improvement, or, hey, did you think about this? And thank you for suggesting something that I hadn't thought about. Not, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. And it's a matter of, again, build that confidence and show that confidence to people rather than just trying to say, I'm not worthy of being here. Having a strong presence is similar to that confidence. And that's really, and this one I did not do as good a job on personally today as I probably should have. And that's, for example, dress a little nicer than the audience. And that way you kind of have an air of authority of, oh, that's an important person here. Being careful to speak slowly and clearly. That way everybody understands you. That way they're not saying, oh, they're mumbling because they don't know what they're talking about. And as I'm trying to do is make eye contact and speak clearly and loud enough that everybody can hear you. Those kinds of things go a long way, and you can get feedback from the audience. When I organize sessions, I always use that as a tool, for example, to find out who's paying attention. And if it's discussions, it's actually more fun for me because I watch which portions of the room are asking questions. And if we get to a point of the discussion where one corner of the room has been quiet, I'll just stop everything and say, okay, this corner of the room, you haven't said anything yet. We can't proceed until somebody from that portion of the room talks. And usually I'll get 2 or 3 really good contributions from people because of that. And because I'm not picking out one person in particular, that's something that ends up really pulling people into the discussion without actually forcing them, saying, you're the person that needs to talk. And that's another way to be able to really kind of pull people into discussions. Those kinds of things in a virtual environment are much harder because where people are on the screen tends to move around, and it's just harder to keep track of. So a question again on these kinds of things, is this fake it until you make it? Because that's what a lot of people say, is you always just want to pretend that you're capable of being somewhere until you actually are officially recognized as being part of it. And I say emphatically, no, it's not really that. But it actually is that as well, because that's a situation we're all in. This is an environment where we're pushing forward the boundaries of things. And if you really ask people when they're doing research or if they're doing software engineering work even, do you know how to do this? It's like, no, but I think I can figure it out. And once you go and talk to people, and instead of saying, okay, these are all super experts that know everything, and find out, no, they just have confidence that they can find answers. That's when you start to understand that I don't have to know everything. I just have to have some basic skills and then the confidence that I can find the answers. And then I can be able to work in this as a true peer. And I can understand that everybody else is also kind of faking it till they make it. And people also might say this is the power of positive thinking. And in a sense, it kind of really is, because you're really trying to build up that sense of, I can do this, I'm good enough, and darn it, people like me. Yeah. Something else that I kind of look at this is really survival skills for a hostile environment. And I don't mean hostile in that we're out to get each other, but it's more a matter of, if you don't understand how we communicate as a community, it can seem very aggressive. Because we will ask people a lot of questions, and they'll be very directed and pointed questions. And the reason why we're doing that is not because we're trying to attack somebody or reveal what their limitations are. It's because we're genuinely curious and we want to know answers or have a discussion. So I had a discussion with a student one time, and I asked him how to expand his work into a new area. And he said, I don't work in that area. I said, I know, I don't either. And I said, you work in an adjacent area and I work in a different adjacent area. And I'm asking for the two of us to have a conversation to see if we can extrapolate and guess how this might apply in a third area. And the other researchers on the call just kind of like, yeah, that is kind of what we do. It wasn't a matter of getting the student to say, okay, I have to have the knowledge. It was more a matter of getting them to understand that we as researchers really do. We're trying to apply our knowledge to guess what's going to happen in a new area. And because of that, we're guessing. And getting the students to understand that, for example, is a really important thing. So this is really comes down to it's learning how we all act. It's really that we all are kind of imposters. And I don't think that we ever truly get to a point where we are truly the experts and the fully competent people that people might think that we are. And getting everybody that's kind of interested in this field to understand that, I think can make it a lot easier for them to be able to join us. So kind of a summary, how I end up supporting people is the biggest one is always be there whenever possible. Occasionally I'll run into situations where I'm double or triple booked and I can't be at a student's presentation. And unless I know that the student presentation skills are good and they don't need me, I'll have to cancel the other pieces and be there for them. And that's just because they need me there to know that there's at least that one friendly person in the audience. The second one is always make sure that if meetings start getting canceled, that you follow up and push and try to and say, okay, we need to meet, and kind of make sure that they don't actually just kind of fall off the edge eventually, but that you keep them involved. And that way they see that you want to make sure that personally they are involved in this rather than just, okay, if you want to work with me, you'll come to me. And if you don't want to work with me, then you'll go away. And that's less for me to do. Part of the other pieces that I do is I try to do my best to stay visible whenever I'm working with people. And that's a matter of, I want them to get all of the visibility and the credit, and I'll do my best to kind of hide behind them figuratively as often as possible and just kind of hold them up and give them that support that they need so they can actually get all the credit for what they're doing. And the last one is whenever there's an issue, or always have a debrief afterwards to make sure things are good. That next to last one about advocating, that one is another one I believe in strongly, is that if you ask how can I help you, it's more a matter of you asking them to take an action that they need support on. If you ask them, how can I advocate for you? You're saying, what can I do that's going to make your life and job easier? And that's something I also try to do a lot of is to try to clear the pathway and let them go forward rather than kind of push them from behind and saying, figure it out. I'll support you, but figure it out. All right. That's my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay, for that kind of presentation advice. I think we have a couple minutes for quick questions from the audience. Any question? I guess we got some good.
We got one here.
So, Jay.
Yes.
Given that I would say you're one of the more successful researchers who I mentored, could you say who and why, like a specific example of someone that you mentored and where they went?
Sure. I'll give you the one of the more recent, most successful ones. And I don't want to take credit for her because she's amazing on her own. But I had a student that I started working with in 2017. She just finished her sophomore year, I think it was, as an undergrad. And her mom and one of the people that worked at Sandia were college roommates. And I was talking to her about getting more women brought in to the field. And she said, well, my best friend's daughter is looking for an internship. Are you interested? I said, sure. And I emailed her and I said, are you interested in doing the hardest thing you've ever done with impossible deadlines? And she said, okay, that sounds interesting. So I had a grant that I had just gotten with Scott, actually. And I described the entire grant on a whiteboard. And then I circled in a half an hour. Then I circled part of it and I said, this is yours. What are you doing for the summer? And she just sat there and stared at me. And eventually, after about 10 minutes, I said, do you want to go home and then talk tomorrow? And she just said, yeah. So she came back the next day and we spent 5 hours and she asked me all the questions that I hoped she would ask. But then she ended with, here's 6 things that I don't know. How do I get started on them? And she managed to go through and figure out how to work through all of those, ask me some questions along the way, finish the research project in another 6 weeks. And then her first, she got a publication out of it and I had her go present and she was the first presenter in the workshop. And again, I was a little aggressive with her and I said, don't worry, there's only 120 people in the audience and they're all your potential PhD advisors. So don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. But she, of course, got terrified from there. We worked on a presentation a bit more. But after her presentation, everybody assumed that she was like a 2nd or 3rd year PhD student. So she finished her PhD in 3.5 years and unfortunately went to Google. But we're still trying to pull her back on the science side. She had only ever worked with me. So at the same time, I understand why she wanted to have an industry experience. But But I have a second student that's doing similarly well right now. So if I get a third student that does this well, it's like, okay, maybe I know what I'm doing then. Yeah.
All right, then let's give a round of applause to Jay. Thank you. Thanks again.
Yeah, sure. Oh, there are more questions. I can stay around and answer questions. I'm happy to.
I don't want to be between lunch and.
Yeah, I'll ask you during the break.
Okay.
It's controversial.
Oh,
no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, controversial has to be on microphone. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. One of the ideas we've also been discussing in South Africa and the South African region is providing, let's say, parallel programming platforms, especially for the younger generations, making them easily accessible as probably each department or each high school, having an equipment to do that. Do you have any experience in this line? And what could you say about your experience with the younger generation, high school and early university students? Thank you.
There's a very long answer that I will try to shorten out a bit. Part of what I've dealt with a little bit directly, but a lot more through some other people that I work with that do a lot of mentoring. And that is that dividing line between people that are wealthy enough that they can afford to do some long-term thinking versus those that are not. And trying to work with people that they're worried about when their next meal is coming, that generally doesn't work. And it's not because they're not interested. It's more a matter of making sure they have food is more important to them than thinking about 5 or 10 years from now. So that's one area where it's challenging sometimes to get people involved in things because they just look at it and say, I can either go work and earn a little bit of money and that way we can eat, or I can go do this thing that I might in some fantasy land have a great job in 10 years. And they look at that and say, I want to eat today. And that's one challenging area. The other part of it is for a lot of the work that I do, it's difficult to get things at a simplified form enough for high school students to really deal with it directly. There is the Show Door project, which I just happen to remember because it's silly. It stands for short and dorky, which was the description of the person that actually started it. And that's aimed at bringing HPC kind of things into the high school environment so that the students can then learn those basic skills and then move on from there. So that's one of the things that I try to bring in when I talk to schools as well, talk to the faculty and say, here's some resources that can help you get started and be able to engage some of the students. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.